2 minutes to midnight. We're in London. I'm here with Rob Timmins, Minh Nguyen, and is it Ben Timmins?
Yeah.
Right? Rob's son. My name's Lorraine Scotson. Myself and Rob, we work for the Saola Foundation. Minh is our research associates. And yeah, Ben, you're Rob's son. Quite a rare situation that we're in here, so we thought it would be a good opportunity, at least I did, to record a podcast while we're all in the same place. So what would be the most appropriate theme of a podcast, the best use of time, given our 3 collective sets of experiences working in Southeast Asia? I decided it would be to reflect a bit on our decades worth of experience working in the region. We've all worked for many, many years in different parts of Southeast Asia, in conservation and research, and how that's brought us to where we are today. Like, why are we doing the work? Why have we chosen the path that we're on right now with the Saola Foundation? Quick recap, Saola Foundation for Annamite Mountains conservation. We're on a quest to find one of the rarest animals in the world, probably the rarest terrestrial mammal in the world, but it's much, much bigger than that. And what I hope listeners get from this podcast is an understanding of the role that Saola plays in a much, much bigger movement for really creating meaningful change in conservation in the Annamite Mountains. We'll start with maybe some introductions. So Rob Timmins, that's our technical director. Rob's been working for, well, you know what, Rob, why don't you introduce yourself? Give us a little summary. Who are you?
I'm always stumped when people ask me that, because I'm not sure where to go. So I started working in Southeast Asia, Indochina, in the early 90s. So my first time in Indochina, in Laos, was in 1992. And I guess I've been going back ever since. Worked for most of my career as essentially a consultant mainly for the big NGOs.
What was the first thing that took you over there? Were you not at university and you got some funding to go over?
As a student at Cambridge, there was a tradition of student expeditions, particularly in the birding community. So the birding community, almost always, students organised expeditions over the summer holidays. And yeah, so that's kind of how I first ended up in Laos, although I'd finished as a student by the time I got to Laos. So the Laos trip was organised by several of us. Actually, most of us had already graduated, and it was kind of the culmination of actually more than a year sort of planning and fundraising. And it was sort of the big, Laos had been, a closed communist country for 30 plus years, and suddenly Laos was starting to open up. And so this was the first opportunity for basically, Western biologists to get into the country. So we sort of jumped on the chance.
And for people who don't know, geographically, Laos, lots of people mispronounce it as Laos. Southeast Asia, sort of sandwiched in between 5 countries, landlocked. Right?
Yeah.
Most people don't know.
Right. Yeah. Between Thailand and Vietnam, the 2 countries everybody knows about.
Yeah. So, Minh, you're from, I'm sorry, I know I'm mispronouncing your name. You're from Vietnam. So, what's your introduction?
Actually, it's quite interesting that like so many special large animals were discovered in the area called the Annamites, which is the mountain range along the border of Vietnam, Laos and Cambodia. So if they all discovered in 1990s, exactly kind of like the same time when I was born. I mean, I was born in 1990, not 1990s, but can say roughly like that. And I actually was born in the area just like right next to the Annamite Mountains as well. So I have a lot of my discoveries or how to say my adventures when I was small looking for animals, but I never had the chance to go to the forest for sure. But later, so that maybe that reason why the whole of my life have been driven by the animal, the nature, that I just wish to work with them as much as I can. So I ended up start to work on the subject relating to nature in 2017 with some amphibian work. And like you talked to me before, do you remember my first day working with nature? I said I remember really well because at the time, the Avatar movie
Avatar?
Yeah. Just out.
Is that the one where they're all
The
blue?
3D one, the 3D one.
One where they're all
Blue
blue?
one.
Yeah, I know which
that's
one. Okay,
right.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I saw the scene of like they make the forest very sparkling, and it's so beautiful, right? And that's how like I also went to the forest and everything is beautiful like that. I mean, at night time and you see everything very sparkling in the forest, and that makes me just like never forget.
Awesome. I never heard that before.
You should go and see that.
I've seen the movie.
It depends on the season, but for sure. In the tropical forest, just like at dark at night, you see everything sparkling around. It's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just, introduce myself. So, I mean, obviously I don't know how obvious it is, but I'm Scottish. I ended up in Southeast Asia by accident. I was on my way to Africa. I wanted to go work with big cats and just got a job or whatever, volunteer position in Cambodia. And showed up and found out there were bears there and really never looked back, to be honest. So I ended up working for a decade and a half or so in bear research before getting involved in the work that we're doing now. So very lucky accident ending up in Southeast Asia. So we all work in the Annamite Mountains, which is the mountain chain that forms almost the entire border between Laos and Vietnam. And it extends just a little bit into Cambodia as well, right? We're very, very focused on the Saola that was discovered, as Minh said, was it 1992? An antelope-like.
For the bovid.
I always say antelope-like.
Yeah, because it's very antelope-like. But the special thing about this animal is that it's a bovid.
Right, the antelopes are also bovids. So Saola and antelope are in the bovids family. Mm. Closely related to wild cattle. Evolutionary speaking, it diverged, what do you think, 7 million years ago, you think?
It was in the Miocene, the point at which the wild oxen sort of diversified.
It's quite, when you think about how old Saola, we spent the day walking around museums in London. I was in the Natural History Museum, you guys were in was it the Victoria and Albert Museum?
Yes.
And like one of the things that really got to me today was a sense of like how young we are as a human race. I found it a little bit overwhelming thinking, okay, Saola, they diverged 7 million years ago. And like, look what we've done. I don't know. I mean, it's an overwhelming sense of responsibility, I think, that comes with that, right? Mm-hmm. The impact that we can have as individuals in such a short, tiny little speck of the history of time.
Yeah, so to that last session, when you go to the Natural History Museum, did you saw dodo birds,
I did.
Right?
I did.
And you also saw the great auk.
I didn't see a great,
maybe the great auk, is it?
The great auk, yeah.
It's just like right next to the dodo. Is it? It's close to the dodo in the museum.
I think that there might be more than one dodo in the British
There is.
Museum.
I saw two in two different locations. Yeah.
Yeah, so the D2 species also destroyed by human in such a short time. Yeah.
And that's what the Saola might become. Like the symbol of the Saola may become something parallel to the image of the dodo, right? Yeah.
I mean, so actually, like, I think, like Saola somehow very much similar fate, quite similar fate to dodo and auk, in the way that, like, they just, like, they have a abundance population of maybe on one island, and they just, like, be naive as well. Mm-hmm. They're very gentle animal, is it right? And people just go there and mass killing everything. Yeah. So that's the thing. So maybe with other antelope, people often see the animal run away really fast. But Saola is very gentle animal.
Yep.
It's a very gentle animal that like we can, like one captive in the captive before.
Mm-hmm.
That Martha.
Martha. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Martha was the Saola that Bill Robichaud looked at, observed.
Yeah.
That was held in captivity in, was that 1986? My dates all.
26.
Yeah. Yes, and so I think the same way as auk and dodo.
I never thought of that before. That
naive, innocent, But we don't hope Saola will end up in the same fate.
Well, that's it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the image of the dodo is very powerful, but we don't want the Saola to just be an emblem of failure, essentially. Yeah. Hopefully not. Okay, so anyway, so this is not just about Saola, and that's one of the points that I'd like to hammer home in the time that we have. So this is really about the Annamite Mountains, the habitat that so Saola are endemic to the Annamite Mountains, right? They're not found anywhere else in the world. Rob, can you give us a rundown of some of the key... I mean, nobody's heard of the Annamite Mountains. I think 99.9% of people in the world haven't heard about them. So can you give a little rundown of some of the key attributes?
I mean, it's a very small area, right? So it's not like the Himalayas, which are essentially a huge mountain range, or the Andes, which stretch, the whole length of a continent, essentially. The Annamites are relatively short in terms of mountain ranges, and they were a very relatively narrow and actually pretty old range of mountains. I mean, the Indo-Chinese peninsula has got a very complex but old geological origins, and is made up of a complex arrangement of old plates. And the Annamites sort of predate, as far as I understand it, the Annamites kind of predate the formation of things like the Andes and the Himalayas, which are relatively young mountain ranges.
Did you put a number on that in terms of...
All mountain ranges are millions and millions of years old, but it's hard to say. So they're not like amazingly high like some of these newer mountain ranges. But just because of their location and their, sort of geography, as with many mountain ranges, they create sort of very special climatic conditions. And it's those climatic conditions that have essentially given rise to the unique biodiversity of the Annamites. The eastern slopes of the Annamites have essentially an ever-wet climate. There's basically rain every month, so they never get very dry.
The eastern slopes on the Vietnam side, right?
On the Vietnamese side. Yeah. And that, it's basically to those very wet forests that the most unique elements of the Annamites are all tied. And so, Saola's one of many species that are very tied to and dependent on this essentially ever-wet forest.
So the Himalaya formed like 50 million years ago.
50?
50
million years ago.
50.
Where?
Himalaya.
The Himalaya region.
Yeah, and the Annamite much longer than that, older than that.
Yeah.
I'm sure like much more than 66 million years ago.
66 million years.
At the Natural Museum.
Did I hear you right, Rob? You said they're not as high. So you mean because they're older, they're not as high?
They're not growing anymore.
Yeah, they're not. So the Annamites are not growing anymore. The Himalayas are still growing, the Andes are still growing. That's why they're so high. The Annamites are getting lower and lower because they're older. They stopped growing, potentially millions of years ago.
Give an idea of or would it be helpful to give an idea of the terrain, sort of what the mountains look like? Yeah, so I mean, the Annamites are relatively somewhat simple in the sense as well, because they're basically just a relatively straight single line of mountains. A single ridge.
Yeah, in many ways, it's the reason that there are two countries of Laos and Vietnam is because there's a mountain range that divided human cultures. And, the Annamites are kind of the three sort of geographical kind of parts to the Annamites, which are generally referred to as northern, central and southern Annamite blocks. And each of those three blocks have got their own kind of slightly different sort of biotic assemblages of species. So the species differ a little bit between each of the blocks.
And Minh, coming from Vietnam, is that... I mean, in Scotland, for example, I've always been aware, vaguely as a child and more acutely as an adult, of, say, the Cairngorms Mountains in Scotland. Is that something that, as a child, were you aware of the Annamite Mountains as a geographical feature of your country? Or is that, are they iconic in Vietnam, generally among the general public?
Certainly, for sure, people recognize the Annamite. Because basically, like, the whole country, it follow the coastline on the right, on the east, but also on the left of us. It's like the whole a long mountain range, is it right? So, and actually the area that I was born is also maybe like belong to like one of like close to the point where, the narrowest area of Vietnam.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's about maybe the narrowest one is about only 50 kilometers from the coast to the mountain. Then obviously, like, for sure, like, I just saw that mountains all the time. I just don't know whether that like a symbol or not. It's just something like in my mind that, yeah, I love Vietnam because we have the sea, we have the mountain, we have the stream. Nowhere else have it. That's it. That's what I thought when I was small. And I quite love it because it's so close to each other too. So I can easily get to the sea and then I can easily go to the mountain. So that's something I really enjoy.
I don't think I've ever spoken about this with you guys before, so it'd be interesting to hear what you think about it. So one of the ways I describe the Annamite Mountains is kind of as an evolutionary factory for endemic species, operating in a similar way as, say, like the Galapagos Islands and the Malay Archipelago, where essentially it's like inland island habitats that have, that geographical isolation has driven the evolution of endemic species. Do you think that's a fair representation or just a load of nonsense?
It's part true. It's more complex.
Yeah.
Because they're also refugia. So islands are not, so in island biogeographic theory, something has to arrive on the island and then evolve into something new.
Yeah, okay.
Whereas on a mainland situation, you can have a species which was always there, which in the past could have been very widespread, but then, because of climatic changes, that species distribution gets restricted to an island, right?
Yeah, so it's almost an opposite.
Yeah, so it's a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain why it's so isolated climatically?
A lot of the species in the Annamites go, back to the Miocene or even before. Over millions of years, obviously, climatic fluctuations, also land movement, distributions have moved around. But obviously certain places on the globe have remained more constant than others.
Do you have an idea of why the Annamites remained more constant than others?
So because I basically, like, from what I read a bit, like, actually my exam somehow I have the question relating to that. So that's really gave me a chance to dig deeper. So what Rob said is correct. It's just like more correct in a way, like it's involved a lot of activities, including the combination of the climate, the glacier movement, like the glacier formation, and also the movement of the plate, different plates of the earth. Mm-hmm. Just like the plate move and create a collapse of the India into like what you call it?
The Himalaya.
Yeah, and we forming the Himalaya. So the Southeast Asia, like the part of like the Annamite were formed much more before that. It's also forming in the same way that like a plate, the heating of the plate that will create the formation of the Annamites. So when the Annamite forms, it will create a difference in like the elevations. So when the elevation will also create different type of climate. Microclimate there. So higher elevation will be like colder as well. And at the same time, like dry climate on one side and like humid, more humid climate on another side. Especially like there's also a time that like when the glacier formation is also connecting like the mainland with like the Malaysia, Indonesia areas too. So there's a lot of exchange maybe of the mammal during that time, or it's already
shaking
there.
His head.
Yes,
Can I just interject here and point out that Rob and Min are married? It's an important dynamic to point out. Sorry, carry on, Rob.
No, so what the most important thing with the stability of the Annamites is that for some reason the Annamites have maintained a wet climate probably since the Miocene. So for 7 million years there hasn't probably been a significant period of drying in the Annamites, probably on the eastern slope. I don't know enough about it, but I suspect it's got something to do with the fact that you haven't got an extensive continental shelf on the Vietnamese side. The actual continental shelf on the Vietnamese side is really narrow, so even during the Pleistocene, a glacial maximum.
Wet and hot.
Yeah.
Right.
The coast was never very far away from the Annamites, but I don't know enough about it as to, how it maintains that sort of wet climate on the eastern side for all that period.
And also the formation of the monsoon climate as well.
But the monsoon doesn't matter so much because the monsoon climate on the other side, right? Communities which would appear to be much younger, right? There's no evidence of old species in the monsoonal habitats on the western side. It's the eastern side with the wet climate where all of the species, the refugial kind of species are associated with.
But maybe that also maybe the one reason. Yeah, the monsoon quite recent, but it's also maybe one of the reasons that causing the shrinking of many unit species, you think, into very small population where maybe other place the animal go extinct and they can't survive.
Well, but we're in a glacial minimum at the moment.
Yeah.
So in theory, the Annamite habitat at the moment is at its maximum. And it was during the glacial maximums when Annamite habitat was probably at its wet forest habitat was at its minimum. And that's probably when the complex pattern, the younger pattern in the Annamites is further. So, I mentioned the northern, central and southern Annamites. Each of those have developed like islands, and they probably developed like islands because during the glacial maximums, each of them were sort of isolated islands of wet evergreen forest, and that's why you have northern white-cheeked gibbon, southern white-cheeked gibbon, northern yellow-cheeked gibbon, southern yellow-cheeked gibbon, because they started to evolve on these islands of wet evergreen forest, and similarly red-shanked duke, grey-shanked duke, black-shanked duke, and various other species with similar sort of patterns down the Annamites.
So, a key point being we've got an area of just extreme uniqueness based on all of these factors we've been discussing. High level of endemicity, so really high numbers of species you don't find anywhere else in the world. Top 5. You said something earlier, Min. You ranked the Annamite Mountains sort of on a global scale.
Oh.
For area of, high biodiversity.
I think just based on the Myers paper before, it classified many different biodiversity hotspots.
Biodiversity hotspot, that's the word I was looking for.
And just only in that Southeast Asia region that we already have 4 biodiversity hotspots.
Yeah.
So people may hear a lot about Indonesia and Malaysia. That is one hotspot, and actually the Annamites in another hotspot.
Yeah.
And is it amazing that can you see if you look at maybe the map of the world, the hotspot quite spreading out, but just only in tiny region of Southeast Asia, we already have 4 hotspots.
There's a hotspot.
Yeah. And they're very close distance.
So the point is the Annamites are incredibly special, but they're threatened, right?
Yeah.
one threat is lack of awareness. Just so many people hadn't even heard of them, which translates directly into being an under-resourced region in terms of conservation investment, let's say. So we're really at the start in terms of what needs to happen to be able to successfully conserve the Annamite Mountains. So coming back to the theme of this discussion of this podcast.
So yeah, it's been threatened. Like maybe Rob, you have been in Southeast Asia for so long. Like you observe on what's happening in the forest for more than 30 years because you start there like an expedition when you just finished your student degree, and now you still be in the region and working in the forest. So of course you know more about the strength of what's threatening the wildlife over there. For sure.
For sure. And I was very naive when I started. I used to think that things couldn't get worse. And I used to think that, that things were fairly terrible in the 1990s, but that everything was going to get better. And I was so wrong.
Well, okay, so we'll take the inevitable deep dive into the negative aspect of all of this then. Okay, so Rob then, in your experience, 30 years, right? 3 decades.
Yeah.
What hasn't been working? How would you articulate the problem?
I would say just underestimating the pressures to exploit and the difficulty to actually manage exploitation in an effective way.
And what do you mean by exploitation?
Just the way that sort of natural resources, particularly large mammals, have been, it's all economically driven. It's all driven at a global scale. We're not talking sort of very local scale here. It's all driven by essentially global politics and a global economy, which sort of filters down right down to the very local level, the forest level. And, it's mainly been influenced by East Asia, particularly China and Vietnam. But, it's all sort of tied into the sort of global trends.
Okay, so driven by Vietnam. Minh, what's Vietnam doing?
I mean, that's actually an interesting point about why we have so many challenges in working and conserve the wildlife species, the nature in Vietnam or Laos. I mean, but we have to go to the reality here is Vietnam out of the war very recently, is it right? Laos as well. So when I look at the history of conservation biology, how it's developed, and when people start to recognize about the importance of conserving the nature and the animal for human sustainable living. It's a long time ago, and it's much, much more before the war in Vietnam. And Vietnamese people or maybe Lao people don't have time to really think through what they need to conserve.
Yeah.
Because they need to live, they need to survive.
Yeah.
So, of course, we don't have a lot of awareness, building up. It's so normal to accept that reality. But that reality is also sad at the same time because we are running out of time. We are running out of time to conserve our nature as well. So whether we will catch up in time to protect our biodiversity, that's really, really a big challenge that Vietnam and Laos need to face with now and in the future too.
And if you could name the single greatest threat on the ground, to wildlife walking through the forests in the Annamite Mountains, what would you say that is?
So illegal hunting is the biggest issue. So the fact that
it's not deforestation, is it? It's not hunting.
That's something interesting because deforestation may be the biggest issue in Indochina, what you call Malaysia, Indonesia countries.
Yeah.
But in the Annamites, illegal hunting is the biggest threat, especially now because the number of the animal is running, have been declining so fast that it's so hard to see any wildlife more, or it's hard to harvest a lot of wildlife anymore. People apply the method called
snaring. Yes.
Yes, and they employ it in a really intensive way, millions of snare in forests to try to catch for anything remaining.
And it's such a cheap and cruel and effective and indiscriminate way of hunting.
Basically, the people who have a demand, they can just go, like the middleman can just go to anywhere and ask like people who are familiar with the area, and they provide everything. I provide you with snare, I provide you with food. You just go to forest, do that work, I pay you money. If you get an animal, I pay you more.
Yeah. So that's why we believe Saola are so rare, predominantly snaring. Maybe further, maybe historically hunting with dogs, but in more recent times snaring, right? Over the last 50 years, I'd say.
Yeah, because
a surge in hunting, particularly because snares.
Snare is very indiscriminate, right? So, and it's very passive way of hunting as well.
Yeah.
They cover the snare, animal don't know. Just like, I keep like, when I talked to Rob about that issue, I said like, just imagine like, you have some mouse trap in the house. You think that like, if you don't know about the recent mouse trap in the house, for sure like, you will get trapped by that mouse trap one day. Is it right? So it's the same like the animal living in their home and millions of traps there, millions snare there. How can they survive?
I mean, I got caught in snares regularly when I was doing my survey work. But small snares, so like little, so things that are set to catch, rodents and things, so pretty harmless.
Mm-hmm.
But still, just
scary, is it right?
Yeah.
I mean, actually, like, there was one time also like, at the time I was still in 2017, 2018, when I would start to work with the nature and do some work in forest, the ranger, actually the people who stopped me getting trapped by the snare on my legs.
Like a big one?
Quite a big one. It's like this big snare. And I said, man, be careful. Yeah, and then he just like stopped me and I said, what? I didn't see it at all. And he said, look. And he just put the stick onto the snare and it boom. I said, oh my God, lucky you saved me. If not, I would be hand up from the ground.
and Minh is quite small, so she might actually have hung up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're smaller than a bear, so you'd have probably. Oh goodness. Okay, so that's the horrible part, but we should maybe move on to talking about the more positive aspect of what we're doing. After Rob's 30 years or so of reflecting, and Minh, probably you and I have both been working maybe for a similar length of time, maybe 15 years or so, working in conservation.
I started to get involved with like nature work in 2017.
2017, yes. I was 2007 when I first started out in Laos. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit now about the solution, right? So, I mean, when I was essentially what the Saola Foundation and Rob has been doing over the last 2 years is building, your dreams actually, right? So everything that you wanted for the last 30 years. So do you want to sort of describe that to us, or?
Yeah, I mean, we focused on Saola. The Saola poses a unique challenge and therefore it requires a unique kind of solution. But at the heart of it all, sort of conservation, I think, particularly in Laos, in Vietnam, in Indochina, is just kind of realizing what will it take, to achieve what you need to. And I think what I've learned over the years, and one of the biggest failings of conservation, is that almost always there's never the true amount of resources that are needed to actually affect, a change that's actually going to be meaningful. And too many, essentially, almost not all, but a large majority of conservation initiatives to this day had fallen short largely because they fell way short in the resources that they had available.
And you're talking specifically for Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah.
This region.
Yeah. And particularly, one of the major resources that almost all projects fall way short on is human resources, having the right people, having the right training, having, the sort of long-term vision that it's going to take to actually put in place what's necessary and have that be actually something that, doesn't vaporize as soon as money and as soon as expertise disappears, which usually happens after a 2 or 3 or 4 year funding cycle.
Mm-hmm.
So projects last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then everything vaporizes and everything goes back usually to zero, sometimes to negative figures.
Mm-hmm.
So the dream, I guess, has been to actually put in place all the resources that we need and have that be something that isn't going to vaporize in a few years' time.
And just like on the resources point, mm-hmm. before we move on to the human aspect of it, you gave me an example some time ago. I think it was the black-footed ferret in America, which was, and how many millions of dollars did you estimate had been put into that?
I'm not sure, but
probably hundreds of millions, right?
Maybe not hundreds, but
tens of millions. Sorry,
millions have certainly been.
So the disparity between the resources that are, allocated to the Western world, versus where I think you could say, in many places, conservation has worked. Right? Yeah, and it's and it is working for black-footed ferrets. Yeah. But it doesn't work on a shoestring budget. No, it's a sporadic shoestring budget. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So continuity of resources and scale of resources is obviously a key factor. But then the second one you talked about was the expertise, right? And that's where the team that you're building comes in, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not just about funding. It's also very much about the right people, finding the right people who have the capability and the motivation and the wish and the desire to do everything that's needed. And that's often usually lacking in conservation, again in the region.
That's funny thing, is right? Rob always not really keen. He just keen on technical things, and he not like the person who keen on giving a seminar or training anybody. And now let's see, you train and you train a lot of people there in Laos. So before you start getting into talking about this incredible team that you've built, one of the reasons I understand so much the value of this and the meaning behind what you're saying is from my experiences when I was back sort of in my early 20s doing field surveys in different parts of Laos. At that time I was surveying bears, and just for my PhD research alone I spent 4 years going in and out of the forest, maybe 3 month blocks 3 times a year. Every time I moved site I would get a new team, an entirely new team of people, a new team of strangers. So I'd have to go through the sort of getting to know you process, the training, all the troubleshooting that comes with it, all the uncertainty, and get the work done. And to be honest, that was 99% of the work. Just getting to grips with this new team. And almost as soon as we'd done that, they'd all go home and I would move to a new site and I'd have to do the whole thing over and over again. And it was exhausting. And it took up most of my bandwidth and most of my energy just to do that alone. So what we're doing now with the Saola Foundation and this sort of vision that Rob's created is to build a permanent team that have that continuity, a sort of self-contained team that will, always work together and be able to move around together. You can probably say it better than I am.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot about kind of discovering the right people in Laos, right? Who when, not that we're going to leave them high and dry, but even if we did, would actually go on and, move forward with conservation. So we put an awful lot of effort into trying to, recruit and discover the right people. And you're very much sort of focused, I guess. I mean, we've probably done the biggest or the most extensive recruitment drive of any conservation organisation in Indochina in trying to find the team. And that's, and it's not exactly, I wouldn't say it's even over now, I mean, we need to always keep looking, and that's, our team's great, but it could be better, and we should look more, and there's a lot more, there's so much potential out there, but you've got to find it, and you've got to put the effort into getting those people.
And a really key thing to point out here is that this is a Lao-led team. I mean, you are the only foreigner on the team. And we were talking about this earlier today, in that this is breaking the traditional model of essentially importing expertise, having foreigner, international-led projects where implementation is in the hands of foreign experts who then go home and take all their expertise back home again whenever the project ends, right? Whenever the funding cycle ends. So like one of the real key attributes of the team that you've built is that you're the only foreigner in the team, and they're already able to work, without you being there, right? We're sitting here in London, and they're off out in the forest searching. Yeah. Doing some of the best work in the region in terms of, searching for Saola and documenting biodiversity in the Annamite Mountains. And you're only just getting started, They've only been working now for, I think we recruited them in January 2023.
Yeah, just over a year.
Yeah.
Right, since we recruited most of the team.
So we didn't talk yet about who this team are and what they do, right? So I always summarise it as three. Well, I mean, it's more than that. We've got a detection dog unit. We've got a wildlife tracking unit. We've got our technical unit. I never called it this, but our technical unit. And then there's the logistics arm. So it really is it's a multidisciplinary, high level, high capacity, versatile, self-contained, incredible biodiversity monitoring team for the Annamite Mountains. Entirely composed of people from Laos, apart from you, obviously.
Yes.
How does that make you feel, knowing that you built that team?
I mean, it's well, you mentioned, right? I mean, it was always been a dream to be able to work with a team that was competent and motivated and kind of driven. And so it's incredibly satisfying, and it's incredibly, I guess, humbling as well in a way, thinking about it. And I think, for the first time, I don't feel, I say this to Minh all the time, I don't feel I'm much of a teacher myself, but if I'm surrounded by people who are gifted and motivated and interested, I don't feel, I almost feel like I'm a terrible teacher.
If you are.
But I'm surrounded by, brilliant people, so I don't really have to do very much to.
No, he's not terrible teacher, he's lazy teacher. But then when the student motivated him, he will become a very, very enthusiastic teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes too much. Because sometimes he will just keep teaching as much as he can. Maybe he will become overwhelmed of the knowledge or somebody new as well. But so he can come from many different ways. But it's very nice that you're driven by that and you give everything to the person who you want to teach. That's really the best thing.
We're talking is it 25? 25 people are on this team?
Yeah. Yeah.
25, right. So let's talk about some of the applications of the team. So, everything's been, the spark in all of this has been the Saola. That's been our driving motivation, but it's by no means the end goal. It's the starting goal. So what do you see? I mean, for me, if I strip it down to its barest parts, I see this, Annamite monitoring, research and monitoring team, let's call it, as a monitoring tool. A tool to, to me, and it's okay if you disagree, if you strip everything away to its simplest parts, effective conservation requires monitoring, like effective monitoring. You can't manage effectively without having robust, continuous and systematic monitoring data. Biodiversity, threats, again, just in its most simplest terms, if you're trying to conserve a species, you need to know, is the population increasing, is it decreasing, or is it stable, and why, in the most simplest terms. So to me, that's how I see the applications of this team, as being able to fill that critical niche in what's needed for effective management. Like, how do you see it? Am I being too simplistic?
No, I mean, I guess the way I see it is a team that has everything kind of, science, conservation sort of depends on questions, right? And being able to answer those questions, and monitoring is just another type of question, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of understanding, and as you say, conservation is very much understanding trends and understanding what's happening. So I see our team as the most versatile and effective way of answering the questions, the pertinent questions that need answering to provide effective conservation, long-term effective conservation. And, by sort of developing a team in the way we have, where, as you're saying, Lorraine, these sort of different components all sort of fitting together, we're trying to create a team that whatever the question is given to them, it's going to be relatively easy to repurpose and redirect so that question can be relatively easily answered without having to reinvent the wheel every time you need to answer the question. So, I guess that's the way I sort of see it.
Yeah, like stopping this perpetual reinventing of the wheel, and setting up a permanent resource, a permanent system, a permanent, we want to be the go-to resource for ourselves, obviously, but also for the other organizations working in the Annamite Mountains that have a need for high level. Okay, I mean, you said, so monitoring, you're saying it's more than monitoring. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
So aside from looking for Saola, what could you envisage as some of the other applications, just quickly?
If you go down the list of priorities that are needed.
Documenting new species, right? I mean, I know that's not particularly a priority.
Yeah, I was going to say that, I wouldn't call that one of the priorities, but
it's one of the applications.
That's one of the applications quite easily.
You estimate that you could potentially document a new species every day if we try to in the Annamite Mountains, if we could.
If you try to, as long as you've got to, by a new species, you don't mind, venturing into invertebrates and plants and everything. Yeah, I mean.
Not like a new large mammal or something.
Yeah. We couldn't pull out a large mammal every day, but certainly, a new species to science wouldn't be too difficult. 365. Yeah, it wouldn't. That's probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of the actual number of, undescribed species in the Annamites.
But like you say, that's not the priority. I mean, I would say the priority is getting snaring under control.
The priority, well,
I mean,
there are numerous priorities. I mean, just achieving effective management is one, but there's so many elements to achieving effective management. I mean, the area that the team is most likely to help with, I mean, what, as you say, one sort of monitoring, but another aspect of the team like ours is helping, sort of support, enforcement patrolling in situ. That will be fairly easy to adapt the team to,
What do you mean by that exactly? To inform enforcement, so to feed information to law enforcement teams?
Yeah, or to work alongside law enforcement teams. I mean, detection dogs are used routinely in enforcement efforts. Human tracking teams are often used, alongside enforcement teams.
And our dogs are trained to detect snares, right?
Yeah, for their own safety at this point.
For their own safety, but it's still, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of, it wouldn't be difficult to repurpose or just new directions for the team. That'll be easy enough to do.
And that's what we want, right? We want a future. One of the things, you talked about, I asked you how you feel about this team, and you feel obviously very positive and optimistic. For me, it's a different perspective. For me, it's to be frankly terrified because of the commitment to each one of those individuals. We've given them a job, we're offering them a career, we're encouraging them to branch out into something probably none of them even dreamt about as a child, and we don't want to ever have to take that away from them. So it's a huge responsibility in terms of keeping 25 plus individual people on the path that we put them on, So I do find that quite terrifying.
I don't think you put them on any path. Everybody have a choice. When you offer it, and if what you offer fit them well, they will keep following. Mm-hmm. And they will do that, following their own path as well. But if what you offer is not right for them, I don't think they will stay. Mm-hmm. So you don't need to be bothered by that. I feel like that because just like me, and I saw from many, just one of my students as well, he somehow I feel like working in the field also requires some special skill that you need to help you to maybe you call survive, but it's not really survive from danger situation, but more you can work in a hot condition, climb up the mountain or something like that. My student, his physical, or adaptation might be not good. And so, maybe after this field trip, I will give up. But then after that field trip, he just keep doing much more. No, I want more field trip. I want to do more work. I want to work with more wildlife. I can't stop myself. I mean, and what I can do is okay, this is many ways that you can work with nature. You don't need just only work in the field to work with the nature. There are also many ways there that you can work. Which one you refer? If you want to refer, you can experience everything and tell me which one that you like. I will support you in whatever way I can. So, so I think we're not forcing anybody here.
No, and I guess that's not what I certainly wouldn't think that we're forcing anybody. Mm-hmm. But we have, I believe, quite dramatically influenced the life path of a lot of young, talented individuals, and obviously offering them, giving them salary, and they've got families that they're supporting, and so it's kind of from that near-term responsibility,
I got that point from you as well, and I can feel that. I mean, because it's quite funny in the situation that in the past, they're just seem like we are Southeast Asia country is not very lucky to do any conservation work, maybe, in the sense that when they get out of the war and they get the peace, and they didn't have enough time to catch up with what they need to do with the nature, with the wildlife, and already on the funding, quite cut down to short-term funding before they said people can be supported with long-term funding for conservation. I mean, come on, this reality. There's no work that we just give you a short-term achievement at all. It's not really long-term commitment to show impact. And we just fell into that period of short-term of funding and very short-time funding as well. And it's caused a real challenge for anybody who really interested in conservation can pursue that pathway. And now, like, we meet with the challenge also how to support. We talk about sustainable living and sustainable environment or conservation. This is what we should support, is it right? We should support people who can continue to do the job well, in the way that, like, support their life. That's very simple. But, like, it's so challenging in this period of time. And so this is really what we need, it's right? So I agree with Rob, like, we have many priorities in a very challenging time that, like, many things need to be on the same ground to work out efficiently. Just like effective management system, good awareness from the public, everyone. We need to have a good generation who have, like, a good capacity to work with conservation. So there's a lot of elements there that we need to really push up, and somehow that, like, your recent project, like, with fighting the Saola, it's not just only about fighting Saola, but it also like support the new generation of Lao citizens to aware more about the nature, about the wildlife, about biodiversity, and also like build up their capacity to follow and pursue this pathway. It's really meaningful.
And I definitely encourage, it's hard to visualize unless you've met this team and been in the same room as them. So I definitely recommend going onto our website, www.saolafoundation.org, and just take a look at the photograph of our team and read a bit, read their individual bios, just so you can get a better sense of who we're actually talking about here. Okay, so before we wrap up, I thought it would be a missed opportunity not to share some anecdotes. We've all spent a lot of time in the forest, so should we go with like one story each of maybe our most bizarre, scary, crazy experience while working in the, in the forest? Minh, do you want to go first?
Oh, there's many.
There must be.
I mean,
we could do a whole other podcast on what it's like as a woman working in the forest, but let's leave that for another day.
It's actually like, life is quite funny in a way that like maybe the most challenging one, sometimes it will become like something the more interesting things that you experience as well, right?
Yeah.
As long as you overcome that challenge at that time. So maybe just one of my most recent experience. Because we got lost in the forest. Basically, like, at the time I was like in a really hurry mode that I need to get out of the forest as soon as possible to be able to fly to the US to catch up with my study, to start my PhD degree. Because like the permission of the COVID causing the permission delay until like just a few days before I need to fly. So I just can conduct the survey really in urgent mode. Somehow like at that time I didn't think much because I had to think of so many things, and I had one local person to guide us to go. I should track it, but I didn't. And he took us on the wrong way.
Did he take the shortcut home? Probably.
Yes, he said it a shortcut to home. But it's not a shortcut to home.
Heard that before.
But like, anyway, so like somehow like we started early in the morning, like around 6 or 7 a.m. And we hope to get home, get out to the road, to ranger station around like 6 p.m. something. And it messed up the plan because like it took us the whole morning get lost in the forest. And I realized that we got lost and we worked actually in a circle. And I told the local person, I said, I think we got lost. This is the location, basically you going back to the camp. And he still didn't believe me. I said, fine, I just stay here. You can run that direction to go back to the camp and tell the speaker out whether we lost or not. I will wait for you here. But anyway, so we figured out that we got lost and we just but I had to get out of the forest. So we decided that we work as fast as we can. We just running in the forest, racily rush out of the forest, and unluckily, it seemed like we catch up, we'll get out of the forest around 6 or 7 p.m. But we couldn't cross the river because the flood from the upstream like called really intensive, wet wave and very strong currents. So basically we couldn't cross the river or the stream at all. And nobody can fire us at all too. So we had to stay there and have a picnic. Quite over there. And my student at the time, just think of like a picnic here. We didn't have much chance to like enjoy. But we put the fire on and stay under the rain.
It was raining.
It's rainy the whole day.
It was.
So our clothes wet, but we still put the fire on and just basically take a nap until like around like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. The water start to be like quiet a bit, and we try to cross over, and
you were just wading through the water.
Yeah, and but the bad thing is that like the one local person who leading us seemed like he feels shy, he got lost, and he just like disappeared from us in the forest. So he got lost from us too. And he carried my backpack and my passport in the backpack. I couldn't fly back to the city in time.
You're kidding.
And we take like overnight car to go back to the city. So it's very hectic at the time, but it worked well.
You got your passport back in the end?
Yeah, he ate all my food in the backpack. He used all whatever I had in my backpack. Because he appeared like, he will not be able to get lost because local people know it. But it's just like he appeared the next morning, after we got out that evening, he appeared the next morning. But like, he ate all my food that night, so fair enough.
Oh well, at least he didn't steal your passport.
No, he know, but like, because we work, they're all very good people.
Yeah,
sometimes we just get too much confident maybe. And we took a lot of stuff. It's quite nice. Like now when we come back to the village, and we just laugh and talking about the story. But yeah, that's quite a scary moment of it.
Yeah.
But also like, maybe you just slow down. Don't be panic. Enjoy what you can and see what will happen.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell mine, and then I'm gonna let Rob finish with his. So again, I have loads, obviously, but probably one of the silliest things is I would spend 10 days to 2 weeks in the forest, and as the only woman on the team, it would always be quite, whenever I get out of the forest, and we would go into like these tiny little villages, we often had barely seen foreigners before, let alone foreign women, like Westerners, I would feel quite, I don't know if claustrophobic the right word, but just, really needing some of my own space. You just I didn't have any personal time, because you're kind of always with people and, So at one point I remember getting out of the forest and into one of these tiny little villages and just, really feeling a little bit crazy because I wanted some of my own space, and going and hiding in a toilet to eat a bar of chocolate. And by a toilet, I mean a little wooden shack with a hole in the ground, right?
Yeah, in a village.
And I was in there and had this bar of chocolate and I did not want to share with anyone, and I didn't want anyone to see me eat it. And I'm sure there were children peering at me through the gaps in the bamboo, whenever the bamboo mat came, I was there eating this bar of chocolate, thinking what has happened to me, what has become of my life. There you go, that's mine.
Quite a distinctive way of enjoying your chocolate.
Yeah, I think it was a really rubbish bar of chocolate as well, so anyway, that's mine. Rob?
He has so many, maybe he should have some story about scaring people instead.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure what sort of story to tell. I mean, but yeah, Minh just mentioned was something that's come up a few times, I guess, in conversation, of just scaring local people.
Scaring local people?
Yeah, not intentionally, but just as
the boogeyman.
Yeah, basically, as just a foreigner appearing in front of them out of the blue, usually with a long beard and...
After many months in the forest.
No shirt on, sandals.
Yeah, no shirt on, shorts, sandals, And yeah, I guess their vision of an evil forest spirit. And more than one occasion I've had people essentially running away, screaming from me.
But in the village or in the forest?
No, kind of in forest but within sort of,
the buffer zone. Buffer zone between village and the forest.
Edge
so you mean
situation.
Like you're out by yourself, looking for something or other, birding or whatever, and bump into someone that's just collecting some food or.
Yeah, and some, usually if I can see the situation coming, you try and make yourself aware and make it, not be sort of a surprise situation, but that doesn't always work out the way you want it to work out. And
they would think you were pecan koi or peanut pie.
Yeah.
What pecan koi?
They're like the Southeast Asian variation of like Sasquatch or Yeti. So it's the subspecies, the Southeast Asians, whatever, of...
The variant.
Yeah, variant. There's two. There's peanut pie, which is tall, and then pecan koi, the small hairy one. So, I don't know, you'd be like a third one, maybe. Third variation.
So then here you are, we found a new species of Yeti sitting here.
New species. All the rumours you must have caused, my goodness. The stories they'll be telling for years to come of this ghost they met in the forest.
Yeah.
That's funny. Okay, right, we're going to wrap up because it's now much, much later than when we started. So, my question to both of you, where do you want to be in 25 years' time? Where do you want to be, like, not physically where, but like, what would lead you to feeling, okay, good, I did good. It's a good career, I'm happy with what I've achieved.
Well, to be optimistic, Saola are still extant, which would mean we've found them. We've found more than one Saola, several Saola. Yeah, it's been significant improvements in conservation effectiveness and conservation management. Things are done more scientifically and pragmatically in conservation. The prioritisation follows sensible guidelines and sensible approaches. That's sort of, essentially solid data driven. Yeah, essentially that.
Yep.
But achieving that is going to be
a lot hard
and a lot of work, but is definitely possible.
It's definitely possible. Yeah. And okay, Minh, do you have I'll give you more time, so in 50 years' time, where do you want to?
It's actually like when I read the book talking about George Schaller,
yeah.
Actually,
he was on one of our earlier podcasts.
Talk about his trip to Southeast Asia, especially in the Annamites. So he hoped to see the same thing, like the wildlife, as they do a lot, like wildlife spotting in India.
You say again, sorry?
Like wildlife sighting in India.
In India, right.
So expect to see the population, wildlife a lot like that, and we can see, wildlife around. So that actually my hope.
Like accessible wildlife.
It's more like we don't need to have to go really hard to find wildlife. Just like even we have to go into the forest very far, and it's still challenging to see wildlife, right? But if the population is still abundant, there's a lot of wildlife, many species live in harmony maybe, and then people can easily go looking for wildlife sighting easily. And it can be a really maybe popular spot because imagine in 50 years people can see Saola. Is that amazing? That is something that I hope for sure. I also think to be able to achieve that, we really need a system that can help monitor, help manage everything more efficiently. I'm talking manage everything here and look at threat, wildlife population, and the resources. So with that, it means it needs a lot of joint effort from the government, different conservation organization, and even the young generation nowadays and the public, we need to get on the same page. The government will establish a system that can help us conserve the nature in a better way. The mechanism that can help motivate conservation work, that would be amazing. So that's what I would love to see in the 50 years, that we can manage the wildlife well and control the threat.
Yep. When's 50 years from now? What's that?
74.
2074. Okay, so let's meet back here. And evaluate our success.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's good. That's been a pretty good chat. Anything?
Is that something that Ben will love to see?
But
in 50 years you can go there and see wildlife, Saola and animal.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah.
So you'll wait for your first trip to Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
We're done.